So you're thinking about getting a real estate license and maybe you're already in the process. Look, I've been in commercial real estate for almost 10 years now. And by far, one of the most common questions that I always get is how to get your real estate license. And then once you have it, how do you take that license and go get a job at a respectable firm and start your career? Well, in today's video, I'm gonna help answer both sides of that question. I'm gonna tell you how to fast track your license and I'm gonna give you some pointers on how to get hired. So let's dive in. All right, guys, so as mentioned, I have been working in commercial real estate for almost 10 years now. And while I technically don't work in residential real estate, I did grow up around it as both of my parents were in residential real estate my entire life. On top of that, I have personally bought and sold multiple residential properties and other investments. So if we're starting the true basics here, a real estate agent is somebody who essentially helps to negotiate and close deals between sellers and buyers or tenants and landlords, depending if you're commercial or residential. And agents have a fiduciary duty to whichever side they're representing. And sometimes it can be both sides. Real estate transactions are extremely complex. And in most situations, if you're working on the residential side, you're helping people make one of the biggest financial decisions of their lives. And then on the commercial side, you're helping businesses either lease or purchase commercial real estate, usually in office, retail, or industrial. Being an agent can be both exciting and stressful and basically everything in between. It's definitely not for everybody and it can be a really tough industry to break into, but for those who are successful with it, it can be a very lucrative and rewarding career and pretty enjoyable overall. In most cases, you essentially work for yourself. As I say, you eat what you kill. This is because you're completely commission-based, so you don't get paid unless you close a deal. Most agents are actually contractors, not employees, so you get unlimited vacation, unlimited sick days, and you set your own schedule, which is great. But on the flip side of that, you gotta remember that you close your own deals. You eat what you kill. So if you're always out of town traveling, it's gonna be really tough to keep your book of business afloat. So I recently posted a day in the life video on my channel showing what the typical office day is like. But that is only a small glimpse into what really commercial real estate life is like, as there are days where you're completely out of the office doing inspections, property tours, touring with clients, or just meeting them off site. And then there's a flip side of that where there are work from home days. And then there's also days where it's a combination of all three, and that applies to residential as well. So if you've seen that video and you've done some other research on getting your real estate license, and you've come to the conclusion or determined that this is the path for you, then let's talk about getting your license, which is the first critical step to kicking off your new real estate career. So the first thing that you should know is that there is no national real estate exam. Everything is done at the state and local level, and that's because every state has different requirements for both passing the test and then also keeping your license active. I say keep it active because real estate requires continuing education. I mean, again, think about it. You're helping people with one of the biggest financial decisions of their lives. So it's really important that you follow proper protocols and local laws. Because of this, states make you renew your license regularly. Some states are more frequent than others. For example, here in California, we renew every 4 years, but just next door in Nevada, they renew every 2 years. Also, in most scenarios, you can actually hold licenses in multiple states, but keep in mind, it can be a lot to manage between keeping clients happy, learning all of the local real estate in those states, and then also just staying on top of keeping your licenses active in those states with different requirements. So while it may sound great to operate in a big region, it's really unlikely that you're gonna be able to tackle multiple states. Now, before we continue down the license path, I did wanna mention that you can still get into real estate without getting your license. You can really just get your license later, and you can start by going into research. You could be an analyst, you could be a client assistant, or a similar route at a firm. And some people definitely prefer this route as it exposes you to the day-to-day of the office and real estate in general. And you also get to know some of the teams within the office, which can be beneficial for when you want to get hired. And again, it really just helps you learn about real estate before you dive in to start taking the online courses and the test. And there's definitely some really successful brokers and agents who have gone that route, and it helps fast track them to actually passing the exam. Okay, but let's get back to the license just in case you want to go this path first. So when you're ready to start the process, there's two different routes you can go. You can either go online or in person. Some people struggle with online learning, so the more traditional in-person route is a nice alternative for those people. For me, I definitely preferred online, so I went that route. And for those of you who are in California watching this, I used Allied Business Schools. I believe they also operate in other states, I'm not sure, you'll have to check it out online. And the videos are certainly dry and boring, but at the end of the day, it gets the job done and helped me pass the test. So one really interesting thing that happened to me is I signed up for the real estate courses and I technically started the clock. I didn't know that there was a set time parameter that had to pass before you could apply to start the test. In a lot of states, they want to make sure that you're not rushing through this stuff. And so they have set parameters, certain amount of time that needs to pass in order for you to get through the classes before you can actually even sign up to take the test. So I signed up for Allied and I actually just kind of sat on it for a couple months because I just wasn't sure if that was the route I wanted to go. I did some more research. I learned more about real estate. I asked some friends that were in it. And then I finally sat down and started doing the courses. I would go into my last job. I used to work in advertising. I would go in at like 5 a.m. before anybody else got there. I would do all my online courses, study for the quizzes, literally early in the morning before anybody else was there. And then as people started trickling into the office, I would switch back over to the job I was supposed to be there for. And then that night I would take the online quizzes. And because of that routine, I was able to knock them out really quick. And I had already started the clock, so I was able to get through pretty much all of the courses within 4 weeks. Now, also luckily, because I did grow up around real estate, I already knew a lot of the concepts that were being explained to me, but there's definitely still a lot to learn. When you are going through it, there's also some really handy software that can help you out. There are some apps on the App Store where you can take practice quizzes for whatever state you're in almost daily. And so if I was like in a waiting room at a doctor or in between meetings, or if I was on a walk or something, I would just take a real quick quiz. It's only a couple questions just to test my knowledge as I'm going through the process. There's another program called Kaplan. Kaplan was great. They have flashcards. They had a lot of really good study material. And honestly, a lot of their questions and answers that I went through the practice quizzes with them on were very similar to the ones that were on the tests themselves. So I highly recommend looking into Kaplan if they have study guides available for your state or region. And then lastly, in LA, I did a 10-hour crash course the day before the test. And this was an in-person crash course for anybody looking to really just run through the gauntlet of getting through every single concept right before taking the test. It was a really good refresher for some of the earlier courses that I hadn't seen in a couple weeks, and it really just helped lock in all the information before taking the test. So between those three, it really helped prep me for the test itself. Another thing to keep in mind is sometimes certain college classes can count towards the credits needed for the class itself and for the license requirements. So be sure to check if you've already taken some courses in college or a community college that would actually apply to taking and qualifying for the test, because you can knock out some time with that and save really a lot of time. The testing facility itself is really interesting. It's a government-run facility, and it reminded me of kind of the SAT or ACT testing facilities back in the day. You essentially have a set amount of time in your little area, and you get through the questions. You can save questions to come back to. And they didn't actually tell me if I passed or failed in person. They hand you an envelope, and you're not allowed to open it until you're outside of the building because they don't want your reaction around the other students. I was the first one done in my group, so I was really nervous that I kind of sped through it too quick and that I was actually gonna fail. I even thought about turning around and going back to my desk if that was allowed. But to my relief, when I got outside to open the envelope, I had passed, and that was such a nice feeling. It takes a few weeks to get your official license in the mail, but the system is updated pretty quickly within like a day or two online, and that's where you get your temporary license with your real estate license number. At least that's how it worked in California. The real estate license number is exactly what you need to start applying to and securing a job at some of the bigger firms. Again, you can technically apply and start the process before you get the license, but it's always recommended to at least be going through the process or be close to passing the exam prior to getting too far along with those firms. Because if they hire you and you end up failing, or you're not very far along in the process, you won't actually be able to start working deals or even start in general. So now let's talk about exactly that. How do you get hired at a firm? I'm gonna tell you two different stories. My own story, as well as a buddy of mine who worked at my firm for a while. And both of them are very interesting, and both of them are completely different. So for me at the time, I was living in LA, and my first course of action was to just start calling all of the bigger firms up in LA. I knew I wanted to start at a bigger firm because usually they have better training than some of the smaller firms, and they have bigger teams, and I knew I wanted to start with a team. So I went on their websites, and you can do this too. You go to CBRE, JLL, Cushman & Wakefield, Colliers, Newmark, etc. All those firms online, you can find their brokers and you can find their contact information. And I just started calling and emailing random brokers in all different asset classes: industrial, office, hospitality, retail, multifamily. I was just hitting as many as I could and just waiting for some responses. Luckily, a guy that I knew from USC's dad worked at the downtown location for CBRE, and he was one of the first ones that I was able to get a hold of and actually go and meet. So I show up to the office not knowing what to expect. I had like one suit at the time that I think I wore to a few homecomings back in the day. I'm wearing my suit. I'm at the downtown corporate office overlooking all of downtown LA to the very top of the tower. Pretty intimidating when you're young and not really sure if this is even the right career path for you. And I show up and a guy gets in the elevator with me and he just looks completely exhausted. I see that he's headed to the same floor as me, and I just happen to ask him like, hey, are you going to CBRE? And he's like, yeah, I actually work there. And I'm like, oh, like, do you enjoy working there? And he's like, first 2 years are brutal, but once you get through that, it's definitely worth it in the long run. I'm like, so what year are you on? And he's like, I'm on year 2. I'm like, okay, good to know. That definitely worried me going up, to say the least. But when I got up there, I ended up sitting down with the broker, and I just kind of told him, look, I don't know a lot about commercial real estate. I'm going through the testing process. I almost have my license. I would love to get into it. I want to learn more about what you guys do. And he basically walked me through like his entire life story about how he got into it, how he does work, how he gets clients. And it was actually really eye-opening, and it was a great positive first sit down. At the time, I was trying to actually interview for his team, but he gave me a really good piece of advice, and that is you want to plant your flag wherever you want to live. I knew long term I did not want to live in LA. I wanted to move back to Orange County. So he said, look, if you're trying to really get into this, you do not want to start in LA and then move down to Orange County when you're building a client base in LA. If you want to live in Orange County long term, you need to move down to Orange County and start interviewing down there and really plant your flag down there. That was a great piece of advice, and that is exactly what I did. He gave me a few contacts to call down at the Orange County office, and I started by calling the managing director down there. So I go in and I meet with the managing director, and the way that he kind of spun it to me, and I don't know if this is the case for every firm, he's like, well, I don't know which teams are hiring. I don't even know if we're hiring, but if you want, I'll give you some numbers of some brokers who I think would be good mentors, who I think might be willing to hire you, but it's on you to call them and actually set the meetings. And I was like, all right, well, that sounds like a fair next step. So I put a tracking sheet together where I had all these different brokers, all these different contacts, and it wasn't just CBRE, it was a few different firms as well. And I was going around and doing all these different interviews. I ended up doing 23 different interviews with different teams over the course of about a month until I finally found the team that I wanted. Although it took another 2 months of kind of going through the interview process, going through the application, getting my license, and actually securing my spot on that team. But from start to finish, I started interviewing in, I think it was February or early March, and then I was hired by mid-June. So that kind of gives you a timeline of how long that all took. But again, remember, I started interviewing in LA and then I moved down to Orange County. So there was a little bit of a gap there. Now, my buddy who started with me just 2 weeks apart at CBRE, we've basically grown up in commercial real estate together. He has a really interesting story as well. So after getting his license, he bought a ticket to one of the largest commercial real estate conventions in the world. It's called ICSC in Las Vegas. And I go every year. It's a ton of fun. You get to meet all sorts of different owners, landlords, real estate people, professionals, brokers, etc. It's a huge conference. I think it's 60,000 people attend this thing. So he went to that. He knew he wanted to work at CBRE. He found the CBRE booth and he walked right up to our managing director at the time and said, I want to work here. How do I get a job? So needless to say, he got a few interviews lined up and ended up landing on a team that sat right next to ours. And that's why we became really good friends. We were literally sitting next to each other in the office and got to know each other. He started literally 2 weeks after me. So we came up through the ranks. We started as rookies, started as runners. We went through all of it together. So it's really interesting to see kind of the two different stories on how to get hired. And I'm sure there's even more out there on different ways to get creative and get hired. But at the end of the day, it's going to be on you to secure the job, because remember, these jobs are about calling people, digging up business, really getting out there and building your network. And they're going to test you when you go to these firms to see if you're actually able to do that. Are you able to set calls? Are you able to get meetings? Are you able to kind of get yourself through the door and get yourself a job? Because at the end of the day, that is the test to see how you're going to do when you become an agent or a broker. So when you do eventually get hired, you usually start as what's called a runner, at least in commercial real estate. I don't know what it's called in residential. Maybe you guys can help me down in the comments below. But I think it's a junior agent or something like that. But in commercial, you're called a runner. And this actually dates back to the 80s and 70s, before the internet, before email. Runners were basically the junior agents who were hired, and they would run around to the different properties, grabbing brochures. They would run around to different offices, meeting with clients. And so you were literally called a runner because you were running around doing all the things that the senior guys didn't want to do. And that name is kind of just stuck. It still sticks with it today, even though it's called I think the proper title is called a sales assistant or something like that. Everybody just refers to junior agents, commercial real estate, as runners. Again, on the resi side, I'm not sure what it's called. Help me out in the comments if you guys know. But anyway, when you do start in the business, leveraging your existing network of family, friends, colleagues, former coworkers, former high school and college roommates, etc. All of that is just building your business. It's also highly recommended that you try and join a team, or at least get a mentor with whatever company you go to. Because the sooner you can join a team or have somebody to work under and kind of learn the business, the sooner you'll ramp up your own business. And again, getting your license and getting hired is not a quick or easy process by any means. People fail all the time, people don't get hired all the time, but it can be very rewarding if you see it through and put in the effort to grow your own business. It's often said it usually takes about 6 to 12 months to start closing your first deals. So you'll definitely want to have some funds kind of saved up to cover that initial span of limited no income before you get into the business. Some firms offer a starting salary, hourly pay, or even sometimes what's called a draw. I never had a draw, but it's basically an interest-free loan that you pay back through commissions in the future. But if you do indeed start on 100% commission, which sometimes does happen, you shouldn't really expect any income for a few months at the bare minimum. Again, real estate can be a great career choice, and it can be very lucrative if it's something that you're interested in. You definitely need to have some interest in real estate to begin with. It's also really important that you like working with people, and you need to be okay with every day being a little bit different. No 2 days are the same in real estate. And also keep in mind, you don't need a license if you're not representing other people. If you're just planning on representing yourself, or you're just looking to invest in real estate in general, the license in most situations is not needed. I have a ton of videos already on my channel about real estate investing, how to get started in it, and what returns to initially expect. I have more videos coming all the time, so please consider subscribing if you don't already. I really appreciate it. But anyway, guys, that's it for today's video. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll be sure to see you next time.